we will go ahead and get started. I'm sure people probably trickle in later, but I don't want to waste too much time. We go get going. I'm sure you have busy days. So welcome back to the Make Money While You Sleep webinar. I'm Italo. I'm your host. I'm the founder of Peddle. I'm also the revenue operations coach at SaaS Academy. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the podcast or the webinar and the first time you've been here, we created this as an extension of our RevOps coaching at SaaS Academy. So the goal of this is to help founders and SaaS subscription members generate more revenue or deal with issues that's preventing them to generate more revenue. Hence the name, Make Money While You Sleep. If you've perfected your RevOps and you have a great RevOps flywheel going, you should be making money, whether you go to work today or you don't, your flywheel should be working, whether you as a founder, do the sales yourself or not, there should be a good flywheel in place. So that's the goal of the podcast. Today we have an awesome host for you. His name is Levinter, and we've had the pleasure of working with him before at Peddle, and we love him. We think he's great. So we're going to share him with you guys today. So without further ado, I'll let you take it away. Me, Adam.
Thanks, Italo. Thanks for joining everybody in the room. Really appreciate it. Today we're going to talk about a really, really important topic, churn. And on the backside of churn, of course, retention. And in our opinion, this is the most underinvested, most overlooked aspect of any subscription, membership, SaaS, or continuity model that exists. I'm hearing some background, so if you are in the room, just hit the mute button. So who am I and why should you care? So I am founder and CEO of Scriberbase and a company called Access Brands. I'm an entrepreneur. And the home of those two companies. I'm also the published author of The Subscription Boom, Why an Old Business Model is the Future of Commerce. I host two podcasts, which you can find wherever you get your audio, both entrepreneurial focused. One is, of course, sponsored by Shopify called Shopify Masters. The other one is our own podcast. It's called Entrepreneurs Exposed. And on my spare time, I do lots of things, including actively invest in startups and advise. So I just want to dive into the agenda first, and we'll get into it. So today we're going to talk about, of course, why churn matters, why you should pay attention to churn in your business, the different types of churn. So churn is not sort of one overarching thing. There's actually two main categories of churn. We'll talk about those today. We'll also talk about the impact of churn on the customer lifecycle and customer journey. We'll give you a couple of retention frameworks that you can use that are quite handy in reducing churn by 5 to 10% at least on average, and then some actionable tactics and takeaways. So let's dive in. So don't probably need to explain to this audience what churn is, but churn, or some people use the term attrition, is where customers sign up or subscribe or enroll in your membership and then leave or cancel during the customer life cycle on their own accord. So it's not the company canceling, it's them canceling. The impact on retention is huge. Okay, we see this all the time where companies actually overinvest in the acquisition side of the business and underinvest in the retention side. But with any subscription, SaaS, or membership model, the battle is won on the retention side. It costs way more money to acquire a customer than it does to retain one. So you got to focus on retention. In fact, you got to focus on retention more than on the acquisition side. But the acquisition side of the coin is what gets all of the attention because that's where marketing sits, that's where sales sits. All of those departments are on the sort of pre-transaction side, the post-transaction side where the customer has transacted or enrolled. That's the side of the operation where we see lots of clients, lots of companies underinvesting. So that is the big mistake that most of the companies that we come across and work with make. We'll go over some stats, lots of stats today, but importantly, probably most important stat that I want you to take away is that involuntary churn, which is one type of two types of churn. We'll get to the definition of involuntary in just a moment. Involuntary churn is a massive problem and accounts for anywhere on average from 20 to 40% of a company's overall churn rate. Okay, so as promised, there's two types of churn here. Voluntary, which is the type of churn that most people understand and talk about when they're referring to churn. Voluntary is where a customer signs up to a subscription or membership, or you've got a client, a business or enterprise that enrolls in your software, and then during the life cycle, they voluntarily cancel their subscription. And this is because they're dissatisfied, you've not met expectations, the product or service is not up to snuff, or you don't have a proper customer service department, or whatever. We've all been in this scenario where we've been on the customer side of the coin, where we've subscribed to something and then said at some point, no, we don't like this, we're not satisfied, we're going to cancel our subscription. That is an example of voluntary churn. But involuntary churn is a major contributor to a company's overall churn rate. And this happens when a lot of subscribers or members actually don't know that they're no longer active or no longer a part of their membership or subscription because their payment has failed. There's been a card decline on the back end. So typically, 95% plus subscriptions are structured this way, where there's a card capture up front, right? We've got a credit card on file. We've got a method of payment on file up front. And then every 30 days, I'm just using this as an example, but the default subscription is, the monthly subscription. Every 30 days, the card is transacting automatically. It's called negative option billing, unless the customer or client cancels, right? So they're deemed to be satisfied unless the subscriber cancels. However, oftentimes the payment fails at some point during the life cycle. So let's assume that there's a card on file. That card is tried at day 60 or 90 and it declines. That's an example of involuntary churn. Now, this is a problem because when companies report on churn, they say, oh, we've got a 5% monthly churn rate or 25% annualized churn rate. They don't say, X percent of that churn rate is a result of dissatisfied customers and X percent of the churn is a result of payment failures. They don't explain that. They just lump it into one bucket. But we know these are two different sides of the same coin, and they've got to be examined very carefully because it's a different problem. And card declines are actually quite problematic, as we can see from some of the stats on the right. These are the average card decline rates across a basket of companies from 2023 and 2024. So we know it's a major deal. So in general, we're going to dive into this in a little bit more detail today, but in general, you guys still seeing the slide here? Okay, I got booted off for a moment. Slide back up. Okay. In general, there are some tactics that we can talk about. We'll get into this in a little bit more detail, but in general, the tactics to reduce your churn are sort of twofold. We have some tactics on the voluntary churn side, which relate to improving customer service, ensuring the billing practices and controls are sound and up to date, strengthening our value proposition, making sure effectively that we're satisfying the customer, right? That's on the voluntary churn side. On the involuntary churn side, we're actually talking about paying attention to the payment side of the business, right? Ensuring that our credit card updater tools are sound, that we're retrying failed transactions. So if a credit card is declining, that we're retrying that card on average at least 5 times, if not 7 times over the course of that next 30 to 60 days to make sure that we can capture that card. So reattempting those cards, notifying customers when their payments fail. You've probably seen this where you get an email and said, oh, your payment declined. That's an example of dunning. Offering alternative payment methods like PayPal, like Apple Pay. These can all help to reduce involuntary churn.
It's actually super helpful. That happens to me a lot. I have a lot of, when I travel, sometimes my business card will decline and I'll get like a memo. And because there's another option that I have my business attached to, like a PayPal, and you just go in and click it and do it right then. A lot of times they don't have that option. I have to wait for my bank to unfreeze the card for traveling or something and then pay it later. I'll forget to pay it for weeks. I would have paid it right that second if they had another option. So it's actually super valid. That happens to me all the time.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dive into this in more detail. One very important concept to understand when we're talking about churn or attrition, if you prefer, is that it's not a linear number. It's not a linear pattern. So if you Google, the average churn rate of a B2B SaaS company, you'll get an answer of like 5%, or 2%. These are sort of just general averages across a calendar year as it relates to the business. The fact is, churn is accelerated, meaning that you have your highest amount of churn activity happening earlier on in the customer lifecycle. That is to say that churn, the bulk of churn or churn risk, happens between day 1 and day 30. Day 1 and day 60, or day 1 and day 90, if you prefer to look at your business on a quarterly basis. And as you move out to the right, the customer becomes less of a churn risk, the probability of them churning declines, or the probability of them becoming like a loyal subscriber, remember, increases the longer they stay with you. So your highest risk of a customer churning happens early on, is the main thing to understand here. So when you are planning for your retention strategies or how you're operationally going to tackle churn, you're going to want to focus early on in the life cycle. What are you doing day 1 through day 30, What are you doing between day 30 and day 60? Look at this in phases. We like to look at this with respect to a customer life cycle in 3 phases. The first 4 months, month 4 through month 8, and then month 8 and month 12, and then way out to the right, month 12 and beyond. But you can imagine that, this is like dating, When a customer signs up to your software, or they subscribe to something, or they become a member, they are new, They've got a new relationship with the company has a new relationship with the subscriber, and therefore their risk of them dropping off is high. They don't know you, they don't trust the product or the service just yet, they're not sure. So we got to reaffirm our value proposition up front and make sure the customer doesn't have that buyer's remorse creep in. We'll get into this a little bit more detail. But when companies report on churn, what you're seeing on Google is just the average number. Generally speaking, the bulk of that company's churn rate happens very, very early on in the life cycle. Now, as I mentioned, when we're diagnosing churn, again, here's another version of how to look at the customer life cycle. We've got day 1 on the left, day 365 and beyond on the right. We want to break it up into 3 different phases. We look at this on the left as the copy that's in red, in fact, is where your highest risk of churn is happening. The copy that's in blue is phase 2. That is sort of mid-grade risk. And then the copy and the bullets that are in black are, the lowest risk of churn. However, the reasons why a client or customer is churning is outlined here. So early on, the customer or client cancels because there's been a lack of quality, or the value proposition is weak. There's an expectation shortfall. They're not satisfied. The onboarding is too complex for the company or client to understand, or the customer to understand. There's not enough communication happening early, We've got to communicate early and often. Poor communication leads to churn. There's been a lack of training or education or content, If it's a tool that you're selling, if they're subscribing to a software tool, you've got to make sure you train that client on how to use the tool. And there's some psychology at play, Because like I said, there's a new relationship between company and client. And so buyer's remorse tends to creep in early if there's going to be buyer's remorse, because the client or customer has a lack of confidence, They've just signed up for something. They want to make sure that they've made the right decision. So it's our responsibility as a company to ensure that we reaffirm that confidence, That we engage with that customer so that they know that they've made the right choice when they've come to us. Now, phase 2, when customers are churning, that's because There's been a poor level of customer service or support. We've got billing and payment issues, right? We're billing the wrong amounts. There's been a billing error. There's a billing descriptor error of some kind, meaning the name that appears on the card statement is inaccurate, or it's a numbered company because you've got a DBA of football fantasy Inc. or whatever, but you enrolled your company as 3456 Nevada Incorporated LLC or whatever the parent company is. Unless you've reached out to your payment processor and changed that billing descriptor to the actual DBA, meaning the operating trade name of your business that your customer or client understands, they're just going to use your default legal entity, right, on the billing descriptor. I'm sure you've combed through your Visa statement and you've read a charge and you don't understand what it is, right? It's because that billing descriptor is not up to date, right? It's not that it's fraud. It's just that that company hasn't updated their billing descriptor to the actual trade name. That accounts for a huge percentage of churn. That little fix can make a big difference. You've got contract lock-ins, right, that are too restrictive. You have product or service reliability issues. These are all reasons where companies or clients churn in phase 2. In phase 3, companies are looking at the ROI, right? They're saying, okay, we subscribed or bought this piece of software or tool. Is it generating a proper return on investment? Can we justify this, right? That's because the controller is diving into that contract at that point in the life cycle, and they're looking at the renewals and they're saying, what are we paying for again? Oh, this tool. Yeah, we're getting good ROI from that. Should we keep that software? Okay, fine, we'll keep it. But if they don't, it's because there's not a return on investment. They're assessing the software tool at that point and saying, yeah, I'm not sure that I'm getting ROI. Companies drop off the map, right, in terms of communication at this point. They stop communicating because they feel like, oh, the customer's been around for a long time. We don't need to reach out. We don't need to communicate with that client anymore. They're a good client. No, we got to keep communicating. So ongoing communication, very important. Poor relationship management, that's also an issue. Or no evolution or innovation related to product or service. Okay, so different phases, different reasons why churn happens. Now this slide, equally important. I'm not going to read every bullet. I've just given some examples on the previous slide, but we're talking about the solutions here, right? So the solutions to those issues by phase. Like, what do we do if we know we've got a diagnosis? We know we've got these issues happening in phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. What do we do in terms of solutions? So this is what this slide is about. For example, we've got to have seamless, frictionless onboarding, right? Onboarding can be so annoying for companies, can be so annoying for consumers. Make it easy. Have it be frictionless. Make sure we overly communicate, right? Double down on customer service. Where companies are taking away from customer service, we're advocating for actually doubling down on customer service, making it easy for clients or customers to reach out to you if they have questions. Oftentimes, clients or customers will cancel because they can't reach anybody, right? They've seen this sort of like support at email. That email goes into a black hole, doesn't get responded to for 24 to 48 hours. No one knows where those emails go. There's no live chat. There's no toll-free number. So the customer says, the hell with it, I'm going to cancel. I can't reach anyone. It's not they wanted to. It's just that they had a question. Because they can't reach the company, they get annoyed, they leave. So double down on customer service. Quantify that ROI, right? On the right-hand side, if it's an annualized software contract with a big client, controller's got questions. Hey, are we getting good value here? Be able to quantify that value and say, we've been providing this software to this company for this long. Here are the results. Here are the outcomes. Here's why you should stay with us. Let's move on. All right, some frameworks. Retention frameworks. We've come up with a couple that are pretty easy. This one is for companies with longer average lifetime value. And then I've got a smaller, shorter, more succinct framework for companies with lower lifetime values or a higher level of turnover. So with this one, the CCG framework, this is really going to come in handy for companies that have that, say, 1 year plus LTV on average, or maybe an LTV of 9 months or longer. We want to be able to break this up into 3 phases and understand what to do in each phase. So the CCG framework stands for Crisp, Care, Grow. These are acronyms. And the acronyms are there to help you remember the bullets under each one. So with CRISP, for example, which is the first framework for tackling retention or churn in months 1 through 4, so early on that customer lifecycle, we want to be able to communicate constantly. We want to reaffirm that value proposition. We want to make sure we have smooth onboarding. We want to support with training, content, education. And again, we want to provide service excellence. We want to do all of those things in tandem early on. Okay, CARE is for months 5 through 8. That's where we've got to check in and get feedback. We've got to audit our billing processes to tackle things like payment side, billing descriptors, pricing, making sure we're billing people at the right price in the right markets, resolving issues fast if they come up, ensuring product or service reliability, things like that. And then grow, gauge customer value, reward loyal customers, offer new solutions or products, encourage word of mouth. Encourage word of mouth being the most important thing here, because encouraging word of mouth means you have or can create, hopefully, customer or client advocates. Right? Advocates are really, really important because they become little marketing organisms for your business. And as they talk about your tool or your software or your company to others, those new clients that come in actually have a zero customer acquisition cost tied to them, right? Because they come in organically, they're through referral, word of mouth. So if you are deploying marketing dollars, let's say, and attaching a cost of acquisition to every single client or customer you bring on, that's on the paid side, but it's incredibly powerful, let me tell you, to have word of mouth happening where you have organic clients come in, right? $0 cost of acquisition. The next framework I want to show you, like I said, is for those businesses that have a lower customer lifetime value, a quicker turnover. Typically like a B2C subscription business might use this framework, not necessarily a B2B company, but still very handy. We call it the RERI framework. RERI stands for research, engage, retain, and iterate, in that order. I'm not going to read through every bullet, but starting with research, you got to deeply understand why customers are leaving and then engage with them, right? You've got tailored strategies to tackle both voluntary and involuntary churn. We've got a strategy to retain, and then we know we've got to iterate and optimize. So the RERI framework, a lot handy for those companies that want something a little bit more simple, but don't have a life cycle that necessarily justifies the CCG framework. Now, a lot of hot button discussion around the role of community. Seems to be something that every company is chasing right now. And I will say that in our experience, not every company is going to be able to have a community associated with their company. It's just the reality. So community works really, really well when consumers or clients have a common goal or a common objective that is enhanced by having a connection with others, right? And they're happy to share their experience with other folks in assistance with this sort of like goal or objective that they're chasing. So, you know, Peloton is a really obvious example. And I know it's sort of a B2C example, and most of these folks in this room might not necessarily apply because it's B2B or whatever. But the important thing is, you know, Peloton has done a great job at building community because, you know, everybody has this common goal of sort of chasing a healthier lifestyle. And Peloton understands that if they put like-minded individuals in the same room, they can compete and share data and join a class together, all in the interest of this overarching goal of a healthier lifestyle. The bike is just the mechanism. It's really an experience, right? Walmart, on the flip side, is going to have a really hard time building community because there's nothing really exciting about putting a bunch of Walmart customers in the same room and having them talk about the discounts that they got on toothpaste or Kleenex. There's no commonality there between the individuals. There's no necessary obvious link between Walmart consumers. Whereas with Peloton, we can tie that to something bigger than the company itself. So I would say that, if you are thinking about community, you got to be thinking about what is the common goal or objective that ties all of these potential community members together. Because where community thrives is really this relationship, not from company to consumer, but between consumers and consumers, and then back to the company. You got to think of it as a triangle. And if you can draw that link between company to consumer, consumer to consumer, and then consumer back to company, that's where the potential of community really happens. But if you can do it, super helpful in driving advocacy, in driving loyalty, in driving retention, recurring revenue, all of those things. And some examples on the left are ways you actually do that, right? Forums, online learning, online content, education, in-person events, virtual events, user groups, referral programs, whatever. But yeah, super trendy and hot button topic right now. Some metrics and data. So when we talk about measuring churn or attrition, you're going to want to pay attention, obviously, to these metrics on the left. So what is your churn rate? And not just your sort of average, monthly churn. Oh, we've got 4% monthly churn. No, look at how much churn is happening in the first 30 days. Okay. Look at your second month. Look at your third month. Divide churn up by month and then divide it up by cohort. Understand who is churning. What are the demographics of your customer base that are canceling? Is there a common pattern happening? What is the NPS of your consumer base? What is the net promoter score? What is our LTV, right? If we boost retention, we boost LTV, right? So what is the impact on our efforts as it relates to a reduction in churn, an increase in retention as it relates to LTV? Are we seeing an increase in customer lifetime value? Are we moving the needle on customer lifetime value? Both on the dollar side of things, the average annual spend, and also average number of billing cycles, right? Because we know if, say, our average LTV from a billing cycle perspective was 3.5 months, if we're a monthly subscription, and we can move that up to, say, 4.5, that's a meaningful difference to our bottom line. That's a meaningful difference to our annualized revenue, right? So understanding not LTV, not just from sort of like an average spend perspective, but also from a billing cycle perspective, super handy. And if you can fix involuntary churn, you'll see that average billing cycle LTV number go up. Referral rate, engagement rate, these are all important metrics as well. Monitoring, of course, super obvious and important. And then generating a feedback loop. So having an ability for customers and clients to drive insights back to the company will help with retention. So in terms of implementation, and then I'll shut up, we have our customer life cycle, right? We've got to be able to map out the journey. What does it look like on day one? What does it look like by month? What is happening every month? How are we communicating? What are we doing during the life cycle? Once that consumer is on board and they're a subscriber, what is that experience looking like? We got to be able to map that out, right? Apply those frameworks. Use the CCG framework. Use the RERI framework. These are very, very helpful. Monitor and iterate things along the way. Understand your data. Understand your metrics. And then if you don't have a retention strategy, that's okay. Just start small, right? Just start small. Tackle one aspect of the churn game. If you're going to take away something, like just look at what's happening within the first 30 days of your business. What are you doing, right? How are you communicating? What does your onboarding process look like? What does your communication strategy look like? Do you have customer service in place? Like, these are sort of basic pillars of a business operation that any company can take a look at, but most companies don't, in fact. But these are obvious steps. Very small, but take these obvious steps, they'll have a meaningful impact. You don't have to tackle everything at once. So just look at those first 30 days. Do we have customer service? How are we communicating? And then you can dive a little bit deeper. And I'll pause for questions at this point.
That was great. Thanks, Adam. That was extremely eye-opening. We do a lot of work with, customer success and HubSpot and tracking retention, net retention, and a lot of it for us is metrics and getting renewals, but we don't really dive into too much of the psychology between like why the churn happens as much. That was really, really insightful for us. I really appreciate it. This is great. This is an amazing presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, pleasure.
All right, guys. So we're gonna open up Q&A now. Again, the point of this webinar is supposed to help you the best we can. So I know most of you guys have a SaaS company, a subscription model. Is there anything you guys are dealing with? Anything guys you'd like help with? Any question you want to ask Adam while you have him here on how you can implement some of these things, or how you can solve some issues you guys have today? Definitely put them in the chat, and we'll answer them as we get to them. Parker, what'd you think?
Pretty awesome. I learned a lot of things, and I wrote a couple things down during the presentation just that we can think about as well, Italo. But thank you so much, Adam, for opening my eyes to a lot of new things to think about.
No, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, there was I had a couple light bulbs go off on things we can do to kind of implement some of this stuff. In HubSpot, we have a tool called Supered. What we do is it's like in-app SOPs. So it has something called process rules or process enforcements. So like whenever somebody goes to do something in a CRM or in an app, you can put it on anything that has a URL, by the way. But so like even like your ClickUp or anything that has a URL, like anything with the domain. If it's like a desktop app, you can't do that, but any browser app. And so it enforces behaviors. Like for us, like one simple example is a deal can't go to this next stage unless it has, a name and contact, these kind of things, right? And it'll be like in yellow or red or green. Green's go, or yellow, red, you still need more information. So I'm gonna start putting some of this into the Super and HubSpot. Maybe we can work together on how to build these things out for people in a practical sense. They can make sure that their team's doing these steps as they go through the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And now there's tracking and data behind it to see what was done, what wasn't done, and how did their retention change when they did these behaviors, right? There's data behind that now. That's kind of one of the things we do that really jumped out at me. I'm gonna try to work out with you. This was amazing.
Cool. We have some questions coming in. One is from Luke. Data around cancellations. Or don't have tools for visibility. What is the best tool for visibility? I need to clarify how you would define visibility. The other question I need clarification on from Christian. We have a consumer app. Is there a difference in churn being paid directly versus being paid by Apple Pay or Google Pay? Is there a difference in churn being paid? What do you mean by churn being paid? Okay, clarification from Luke. Do app and GP have lower failed billing rates? Apple Pay and I assume AP and Google Pay have lower failed billing rates. The answer is in the previous slide. Those are the average decline rates on those APMs. Do Apple Pay and Google Pay have lower failed billing rates? The answer is typically they do have slightly lower failed billing rates, but it depends on the processor that you're using for the general. So the general credit card processing side. So if you're using Stripe, that's one thing versus some other processor like Moneris. You might find that while they're close, you may have a slightly lower failed billing rate with Apple Pay and Google Pay if you're using Stripe, slightly higher failed billing rate if you're using Moneris, for example. It depends on your processor. Now, we can talk about processing in more detail, actually, if people are curious about processing, because not all processors are equal and not all declines as a result of who you're using as a processor are equal. And the best way to test this theory is to actually set up multiple payment processors and then load balance your transactions across the different payment processors that you have. What most companies do, for example, most B2C companies, and this is true for most sort of SMEs on the B2B side too, is they'll set up Stripe as the default payment processor, and they won't have any other processor in place, which is very risky and terrible business practice in general, because the processor holds all the cards, and if they want to shut off your merchant account, they can at any time, and then you have no ability to process credit cards, nor do you have necessarily the ability to start to load balance across another processor. So I would recommend having a Stripe account, sure, but also setting up other processors so that you can load balance and test these things. You might find that you have a much higher approval rate through one processor versus the other, and then you can route transactions through there after your A/B test.
I agree. We had a Shopify store back in the day. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Okay, next one. Christian says, sorry, meant, is there a higher churn rate from Apple Pay or Google Pay? No data, no consensus data, I should say, as it relates to whether or not Apple Pay versus Google Pay have a higher churn rate, one versus the other.
Yeah, I think typically, Christian, with the payment data, you have the transactions and failed transactions on the payment processor, but the churn data for them will likely be in their CRM, like their HubSpot or their ERP, or Salesforce, HubSpot, or Oracle. So typically that's not going back to the payment processing data. That's in a different system, which probably help pretty close to the vest for those companies. I think, Luke, when you mentioned, you said we have amazing data around cancellations, however, don't have tools for visibility. What is the best tool for visibility? When you say, so visibility into like churn rates, cancellations, that kind of thing, because usually that's your CRM. So I would recommend either your payment processing, like Stripe has great like churn reporting. So Stripe has really great API, really great churn reporting. Also, your CRM should have your churn reporting as well. I think your Shopify would as well. There's some reports there. So it depends on what systems you're using, but some good ones are usually your CRM, like HubSpot, or your Shopify for e-commerce CRM. And then your Stripe, your payment processor. Not all of them do, but Stripe does. Stripe probably is the only one that has churn data for subscription models. If you have a Stripe account, and you have a subscription module set up, you'll see all the churn. It gives you month-over-month churn. Sorry, did you catch that, Luke? Did I miss something? You want me to repeat one part of that? Oh, okay, cool. But to kind of piggyback on what you said, Adam, I had a Shopify store. We were early Shopify Plus, like beta user, like 2014, I think, maybe 2015, when Shopify Plus had just come out, and it was only for people who had some amount of revenue, and they were beta testing, and we got invited to it. We were doing, almost a little over $1 million, some change. ARR for, not ARR, but like annually with our store, e-commerce store. And we had, what did we have first? I think we started with PayPal, and then and they froze our account because we had a couple of chargebacks. And then and so we ended up having to go to Stripe and then get Alipay. So we learned a lesson the hard way. We only had one to start with, and then when it froze our account, we had to like quickly pivot and add multiple other payment processors. But we noticed that too. Like everyone has kind of different decline rates, like Alipay, Stripe, all these different things. But it's definitely good practice to have multiple. Like right now, even us being B2B, we have multiple. We have HubSpot, we have Stripe, and we have QuickBooks. So we have a couple different billing modules, just in case anything ever happens like that again.
Yeah. I mean, most companies don't plan for this, nor do they understand like what a chargeback is. If they get into chargeback trouble, that's where they start to learn very quickly. And that's because, their funds get put into reserve, rolling reserve, and then they get put into sort of deemed the high risk bucket. And then they have no revenue, at least for a period of time until they lift that rolling reserve. So we coach clients all the time on this. But yeah, load balancing multiple processors just out of the gate, planning for that rainy day is super important. Question from Jeff, from a retention perspective, what should we be considering when putting together a communication strategy? So pretty general question. I'll give you some general best practices here. So on the previous slide, we talked a lot about mapping out your customer lifecycle. Framing the customer lifecycle vis-a-vis churn or retention strategy is one thing. You can apply the same logic as it relates to communication as well. So starting with day one, on the far left, mapping out your customer lifecycle, to day 365 and beyond if you want to, but at least to day 365, and then drawing the milestones of along the way as to your communication touch points with the consumer. So what are you communicating on day one, right? You've got a welcome sequence, right? It gets activated. You've got order confirmation, shipping confirmation, welcome sequence, how-to guide, some onboarding or training documentation. That is going to be a part of your, say, day 1 through day 10 communication strategy. And then you'll talk about channels. Are we pushing this through email? That's the default. How else are we communicating? Are we communicating some of these aspects via SMS if we've captured the mobile phone number? Okay, we're doing that too. On day 30, we've got our month 1 milestone communication. What is that going to look like? What are we saying? How are we saying it? Day 45, day 60, day 90, day 180, and beyond. All of these milestones should be mapped out along the customer life cycle. And then you should be talking about and articulating the type of communication that you're doing. And one of the big mistakes that companies make, and they make it all promotional, right? Oh, we're going to push this piece of email communication out that talks about, this promotion, this sale, this discount. That is a great way to erode your email list or your customer base, or really piss off your customers. What customers want is value-added content, value-added communication. Yes, you can have a promo type communication that happens, but don't make it the default. Just mix it in, right? Along with communication related to whatever it is you're selling, or some value-added content, how-to guides, white papers, industry reports, trends, or insights. Think of your client as someone you're helping, right? Not someone you're selling to. If you can just reframe that, that'll go a long way for your communication strategy for sure.
For RevOps models, hopefully this is helpful, Jeff. For RevOps models, again, our process isn't sophisticated as Adam's, because he's more of a professional and specialist on like subscription business and how to make that successful for your customers. On our side, we're like on the business side, like the data side of like what metrics need to be tracked, how to get the data out, how that data should be structured to infer what you do with your team. Where he's kind of on all sides, but we're a little limited on what we do on that side. But I will say, like, we have different check-in stages along your revenue pipeline. So like revenue is like your marketing that brings in the leads, the sales that closes them, your onboarding that gets them set up and going, and then your maybe account management or customer success, based on if it's a SaaS or if it's a service business, whatever it is, that kind of goes on. A couple of things that we always have is close, obviously, like sign, contract, close, one, paid. These things are obviously kicking off the relationship. And then the next thing we always have is the onboarding phase, like going live, whether they're using the product or not, or they've been onboarded to the product, or they've been onboarded to the service. So onboarding check-ins. We also have an impact check-in, like make sure they got the impact, the ROI that they were promised when they started. We have that check-in. It's different based on every company, because how long it takes you to get onboard impact is different. We do CRM implementations. It's a good like 2-3 months before someone knows if it's set up right and they're using it. So we time ours with that, but everyone, the timing is different, but a good check-in is an impact, right? Like they bought, they're live, they're using it. Did they get the ROI, right? And then some more, of course, like the contract's going to be renewed here soon. So make sure there's like a retention, re-engagement, or like a call for like, renewing the contract, which is way further down the line. But I think that the Crisp Care Grow framework you had puts a lot of steps in between, like they're live, they're using it, and like the renewal. I see most companies fail because they're live, they're happy, and then renewal a year later, we didn't talk the whole time. So I think the Crisp Care Grow framework helps you get a lot of more touch points in that time frame. That'll probably make it a little stickier. Cool.
Cool. Any other questions related to anything subscription commerce, SaaS, retention, acquisition? We got a few minutes.
And while you guys are thinking, if you guys we'd love to have some feedback. Let us know what you thought about the format of this. This is a new series for us. We're going to be doing one and last Thursday of every month moving forward. I think we'll probably go to bi-weekly here soon, but we'll make that announcement. But for sure, at least the last Thursday of every month, we're going to do this. We'll bring on a guest and we'll talk to you guys about how to help your SaaS business make more revenue, specifically revenue focused, because when we're working with startups, if you can, the key to scale and growth is revenue early on. That's the lifeblood of your business. So we're going to focus on that first, and then everything else kind of falls into place. So if there's anything you like about the format you don't like, let us know. We'd love to have the feedback in an email or here in the chat. Both great. Awesome. Okay, well, we'll go ahead and start wrapping it up, guys. Adam, thanks for coming. This was amazing. What a great presentation. We learned a ton. We do this full time and we still learned a ton. So Adam is a wealth of knowledge. Thanks for coming, man.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So after this webinar closes, you guys will get an email. In that email, there's going to be this deck that Adam has. So if you guys want to take that home, you'll get a copy of that. Adam also has a few other white papers to help with your subscription business. Some are based on churn, some are based on different parts, like even planning your pricing, even building the model. Like there's a lot of different things he can help out with any kind of subscription business. He's a pro. So we've listed some of his white papers in there, some of the assets you can download, like the Chris Care Growth Framework and like the slide deck. You guys will get a copy of. So definitely keep an eye out for that email. Check your spam as well, because it won't come from Peddle. It comes from our webinar tool, which is Contrast. So make sure you check the spam filter on there, accept it so you get these in the future. And then you'll get a list of some of his frameworks to help you guys grow your business. You'll get his calendar as well. So hop on a call with him and chat with him more. I do recommend that. Like I said, we've worked with him at Peddle. He's phenomenal. He's a great guy. I really enjoy working with Adam. So you guys will get all that information and you can follow up with him then if you need help. I'm glad you like the polls, Jeff. Thank you. We put a lot of time into those. I'm glad you like that. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming, guys. There will be a recording of this as well on the site. So, who could benefit from this as you guys meet people and you're like, hey, I saw this cool webinar on churn. You can send it over to them. This is going to be live on the site forever. So thanks for coming, guys. Adam, thanks again for having me.
Pleasure. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Cheers.